Alright, hell yeah. So in this video, we're going to compare both these boats. And so it's kind of interesting. The first thing that I notice is this flat spot stayed, and then this got hella wrinkly. So because in the water, like it still might be waterproof, except that it just got soft. You know what I mean? So that fabric and that glue definitely got soft. Hell yeah. In this video, we're going to see just the dead, and it's so interesting how, like, to me, popping out that floor was hugely significant for me being able to do spins. And then in this boat, it was just a little bit too long, where, and I'll show footage hopefully in this video, where the front of the boat was getting in the way. And so now with this boat though, I definitely was trying for like the R1 play boat, like how small could you go, and why not make a small boat because it's less material. And that thing already weighs 90 pounds. All right, hell yeah. But it's just so interesting that this boat is significantly more rockered than traditional 10-foot rafts, you know, that came before this. And still, this does not have enough rocker for me. Not necessarily not enough rocker, but it doesn't allow this to release this corner as much as I want. And then the front, the bow, totally gets in the way. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at, is that bow could definitely, that bow could have a huge more rocker. And then we also put a bar across the bottom so we can actually pull this flat, and that was actually an improvement. I would keep that improvement in an R1 boat, because like the RMR Thundercloud just already has, it's already railed. It's already a railed boat to begin with, and that is a benefit up front. Now in the back for spins, you definitely need, you know, to be able to pivot sideways. And maybe you don't need this super far back here, but you definitely need to pivot sideways. And so, yeah. So we're pretty much similar on that aspect, except that this is so much longer. So in this video, we're going to kind of take some measurements, because this definitely feels faster. Where you actually, when you're edging, you're at least, I mean, you still have this full length in the water. And you can see that, hey, there's not a lot of rocker in this outer tube. And that was also causing it to actually catch up on this. So that's why I wanted to do a higher rockered. But even that shape's a little bit kind of wonky. Where over here, this might be a more subtle shape. But what happened on this boat is it's so basketball shaped that it just wants to roll to that edge, and then you're already on the farthest point. So there's no secondary stability after that edge, and it's easy just to go, you know what I mean? So we're going to be working on, yeah, and then so that also I'll have to, I think I'm just going to talk about that in other videos, but for this, you know, I got about 10 minutes before it hits 9 o'clock, and I really want to just take some measurements. But yeah, I think, you know, and if you get rid of that, this boat is fairly normal, you know what I mean? But you can, when you, this stern is higher. So that stern though, even if I do tilt the camera, this stern angle is significant. Maybe not, you know what I mean? Oh, the thing is though that you're never, I can't sit on this back portion of this boat, where in this boat, hell yeah, I've designed it so I can sit right there. So my neutral position is right here, and then I can sit back onto that tube. In this boat, I'm relying on leaning back, and then really relying on it tipping onto that corner. When it tips onto that corner, that kind of releases the bow. But from footage, we can see that that doesn't release the bow enough when surfing. And so, yeah. And then the only thing I can't do on this boat is make it effectively shorter. But I could try to actually get more rocker. I mean, if I can get more rocker on this tube by actually making a frame that when I inflate it, it actually rolls over onto a frame, and makes that have more rocker this way, then I can effectively shorten the water line of that boat, and so that is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's night and day how even this boat is very flat. But even in it, so and I think we got to take some measurements. Like I've already taken the measurements before. You know, we have like a couple inches, almost 3 inches. So that this is radical compared to a traditional boat, because when you do tip that onto edge, you are definitely you're definitely edging the boat. But what happens is even this isn't enough where like the boat will fall over onto, you know, the boat will fall flat, and that'll get in the way. All right, hell yeah. We're running low on juice too. And so the thing with this boat is that this wasn't long enough. You know what I mean? So, and that's the first measurement I can take. This was 29 inches, almost 30 inches all the way across. And this is much narrower. And so that's, for making a small boat, that was a mistake. Well, that was just something I wanted to experiment with. I thought that, because I was working on a design where I would have this tapered and then a stair step, but that's too much. You can have this totally flat. And because I get a lot of speed from these rails. And the thing that this boat has that this boat doesn't, and I think I would add back in, is rails, because they're the 2 points of contact. Because when I do put this onto edge, I'm contacting on that surface and this surface. And let's say at the halfway point it's kind of out of the water, but at least those 3 tubes, or those 2, and then that surface with a gap in between, and that adds stability. This is literally like a basketball where it doesn't have any stability point. If you actually found that stability point, it would be those 2 surfaces right there. And you see how far those are away. So it isn't even interesting how this gap right here, still having that stair step, but definitely a flatter stair step, which keeps that at a higher elevation. And then when you do tip it, then you have this gap. And I think that can reduce surface drag. And so that is a benefit. But yeah, let's take a look at this again, because when I am on those 2 surfaces, there's my contact, and it's not all the way out to the side. Where here, man, we just got a little bit maybe greedy. I don't know, just, you know, I tried something, you know what I mean? But what we found is that those 2 surfaces are my balancing point. And so what I'm going to do with this boat is I'm at least going to pick a side, and then I'm going to push out this material where, you know, like, hey, I could, essentially I'm going to make I'm going to add foam right here, even though it's going to be difficult to paddle across, you know, but I'm going to work on foaming out from that side, and then maybe foaming out this side if I'm going to do like a different design on both sides. But this was substantially farther out, and this side, that was significantly shorter. And then so when we come over here, we can just see the length. And so hell yeah. So I think, yep, this is pretty good just talking way through. And this was, I knew this was going to cause me trouble, but this is total basketball shape, where if I do lean onto that surface, those are my 2 contact points, and I've just lost everything. And the boat is now skyrocketed, where all you're trying to do is edge the boat and release that by like 9 inches. You know what I mean? Where we have proven that if you put these in, you can, you know, edge the boat as much as you can, release as much as you want on the other side of the boat, and you know, you can target that in. Now, what I've found though is that if you do release quite a bit on the other side, it is useful and necessary to have these sitting tubes to be full size. You know what I mean? Even 20-inch, 22 inches, like the RMR Fat Cat or whatever. You know, having those big tubes, maybe 21 inches on the RMR Fat Cat, not sure, but that's huge in sitted position. Now, it doesn't affect the water line at all. You just need that platform height to be taller. And so that was what I was running into this, is that when I did put this onto edge over on this side, it's just so low to the water. You know what I mean? One, the surface area, you know, the buoyancy is really dragging in, and then, and you know, the water lines could be like right there, and I need 18 inches. You at least need like 18. Well, I don't know how much a boat drafts, but these are about 18, 19-inch tubes. They say 19, and this is just enough. I could foam this out though. And so let's kind of get a side view of the back just to see, you know, how much buoyancy is there. And you see this, you know, you have, when you do tip it on edge, you still have a lot of flat section. You know, you have a lot of boat that still is planing, and so that's what you want to keep. Like, hey, this is actually a great shape. It's fast. You just want higher rocker at the front to effectively shorten your boat. You can have it 10 feet, but then I would shorten this by a foot and then rocker out. That was the thing. That's what I was trying to go for. And instead of just shortening, you know, the boat by a foot, I shortened it like 2 feet on both sides, and probably even more, because this floor is very long, and then that was it's almost the length of just a playboat, basically 5 feet. All right, so I don't think I'm going to take any measurements, just because I think we kind of see the gist. Yep. But I think what I can work on is if I can stable this boat out, then I've proven that you can have a basketball shape, and then you can have a contact point. Even if it's impossible to paddle over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put material out here, so then when it goes down, it hits a flat, and then literally the boat can't go any farther than that. The only issue is that the boat's already kind of skyrocketed, but that's fine, as long as it doesn't get past 45, and that's even what I want to work on. If the boat tips to a 45-degree angle, can you put a bomber surface in here? And typically what you're going to do, or just what you're going to do, is you're just put a flat spot in here, you know what I mean? So when you do tip it onto edge, you know, it hits a flat chunk, you know, and you may as wide it as possible. It'd be hard to paddle over, but at least when you lean out, and then because I tried that in my boat with this, with the sponson out to the side, and it did work. It just kind of drug in the water. And so with this boat being so small, I could work on that same thing and still see if the dynamics are easier to paddle. But that was cool. When I put that sponson in, it's just like you couldn't overtop the boat. And so like you have freedom to tip the boat all the way to that surface, get your butt on that corner. But then if you have this jutted out position that you can't, you know, and you're leaning into it, then you can't overtop that. And so that's what I found with this front beam, is that this was wildly stable. Like you could sit on that, the boat would go vertical into a J, but not quite vertical. And it had 2 points of contact. The buoyancy was out to the side, and I was just thinking all the buoyancy was coming from that bar, but that's ridiculous. Now looking at it, this proved that those 2 stabbing points of contact were remarkably stable. And so that is something I would absolutely keep in the bow of the boat. So this is the bow, because this is super unstable, because the second it actually pushes into something, the boat wants to do this, where this stabs like 2 teeth, and then they're wide. Now, in the back, I couldn't. This was an unstable stern actually. So you kind of want the same thing and have two teeth in the back. Even if you're going to do this narrow profile, two teeth in the back would be useful. And then you can kind of do cool things where it's just like you don't need this material right here. You could actually have the teeth come fairly sharp, you know what I mean? And you could have a well right here. You could still have it the same height for water and stuff, but or not, you know what I mean? And so that was kind of interesting with this design, where water could come in and you could actually move through that. You know, even so, I would probably eliminate the bar and then just really get this to be fleshed out where it's high enough where it makes sense, but low enough where it actually does plug and water comes in over that draft surface, and then just the same in the back, you know what I mean? And even if you weren't able to climb in the back, you know, but I think you could make, just open up this and still have the teeth, you know? And so from a design perspective, you would do that. You would, like that, that's big enough for a body width, and then you would come in at a higher angle. And when you're doing spins, I don't think this stuff gets in the way. It might. But what you're doing also is then you're putting then you're putting a fabric surface. Well, you don't have to. You could just have the, that was interesting. But basically, yeah, I would mimic it. I would wanna work on that design where this is mimicked front and back. But definitely, in this did not work from the back perspective, probably because it was too rockered. Hell yeah, because when I was sitting back there, the boat's just gonna skyrocket. So that was way too much for a, you know, if you're gonna sit on this tilted surface, the boat is just gonna go crazy. Where this was fine, and this was even, I don't know if this was extreme. It's actually probably similar to the other boat. It is extreme because it's kind of highly rockered, and so it makes this effectively shorter. So whatever this boat would be lengthwise, the fact that you do have this rocker up to a flat, when you're back onto this, you know what I mean? That's your water line right there. Everything else is out. Okay, so I think I'm done, because it wasn't a matter of taking dimensions. It was just a matter of like core concepts where, hey, this is pretty chill. I would definitely on this still reduce that floor, get these tubes to be a double contact point, which we don't even have here. You know, this is the opposite, being a shorter boat. We don't even allow these outer tubes to rise out of the water. And so I think that is, you have to. There's no reason to do this. Even on my boat, they're for spins, because you can still, if your boat is highly rockered, even if it's 10 foot, if it's highly rockered, when you're doing spins, you can well, to do spins, you have to actually edge the other side out of the water. So if this is flush, or if that is lower, then it's difficult to edge the other side out of the water. So granted, but I found that it wasn't that difficult. I was still able to do it even with that bar and then that push down. Hell yeah. And this, you know, that doesn't need much, you know, so that's really interesting how you don't, like, the dynamics back here are so subtle, even though this is a radical design compared to normal 10-foot boats. You know, flip your own 10-foot boat over, and if you don't have any protrusion out from your perimeter tubes, you know what I mean? That's how boats were designed. You know, this one is just kind of an anomaly. So this is the reason why I, you know, wanted to focus on something. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yep. All right, I think I gotta call it. We did it. Booyah.